The second is whether violence will work in achieving its goals. And thirdly, the issue of whether violence is right. We must, of course, remind ourselves we are looking at whether it is justified. This is central. Now, to consider the first. Is global warming a pressing issue? Now, it's almost a shame, to be honest, that this is a flashpoint. Not only because of the dire state we're in, with 96 months until the point of no return, but also because the opposition had accepted that we were in a situation that needed to be dealt with. Yet there seems to be confusion. They have then suggested that we have actually dealt with the problem sufficiently, or are dealing with the problem sufficiently, through the use of peaceful measures. Now, we believe this is clearly not the case. Now, we are clearly not in an acceptable situation. We've looked at the G8, 96 months. We've looked at the Oxfam, saying that crops are under grave threat. We've looked at the FAO, telling us that 70% of people would see a shortfall in food. This is not an acceptable situation. And frankly, if it is, I do not believe I'm disappointed in humanity. They've said that gradual measures are the way forward. Not only are they working up till now, but they are the way forward. And yet they do not dispute that we have 96 months. I mean, how gradual can we tolerate, to be honest? Can we continue to make very tiny concessions to very slowly work on the issue? Or do we need to actually solve the problem? Now, we believe clearly we need to solve the problem. And peaceful measures have abjectly failed to do this. This brings us on nicely to whether violence will work. Now, we have shown, as I've said, that peace is not working. So we have stressed that all other avenues have been exhausted, as the opposition have said must happen for violence to be acceptable. Now, they've used, frankly, trivial, inapplicable arguments and examples about the situation with McDonald's, about Luddites and jobs, about Wales. This is clearly not, in touch with the gravity of the situation. And they've not provided any real ways in which the peaceful measures have been working. They've held up the inconvenient truth, for instance, as an example of how you can raise awareness through peaceful action. And we agree, this is obviously a positive thing. But the most minor forms of violence at G20 in London, we must remind ourselves that many of these were just people attacking buildings, attacking government barricades. These are not even these are not killings. These are not bombings. These are very minor. Even these surpass the inconvenient truth by miles in becoming the biggest news story and scandal in Great Britain. One of the, obviously the most advanced countries that really needs to act on this. We must stress that violence really is always going to be effective if it's acting for the will of the people, as it is. Now, obviously, we accept minor violence, as a G20, is not going to be enough on its own. But we are, as we have accepted by laying out conditions that we can use the Geneva Convention, we can escalate this violence until we achieve solutions. Ultimately, I guess, we are looking at our greatest weapon, I suppose, would be regime change or revolution, where we take the government out of the hands of those who are being negligent about the position, put it directly in the hands of the people who want action on this situation. This brings us nicely onto whether violence is right. Now, they've been contradictory on this issue, saying that it is both inherently wrong and acceptable in certain cases. They've conceded the point, and not even really tried to rebut the point, that the right to life is the core, fundamental responsibility of government. And the fact that we're in this situation of not acting on it makes clear the fact that the government has been negligent on this. The government has not lived up to its side of the bargain, its side of the contract between government and citizen, governor and governed. And as such, violence is justified. They have indeed, in cross-examination, accepted the example of the Bastille as wholly acceptable a use of violence, because other avenues had been exhausted, as we have shown, and the government was not acting for the will of the people. As we have shown that the will of the people is to maintain human life, to act against this situation now, we must beg you to support the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, referring from the original case of the affirmative thing, it looked as if they're trying to prove that violence is justified in the case of governmental neglect, ladies and gentlemen. And then it was only later when they shifted their case into trying to prove that violence actually works in preserving the environment, because that argument clearly came up only in the second speech. So in order to prove our burden as the negative side, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to do mainly three things. First of all, I'd like to tell you what you need to do to save the environment on a global scale. And secondly, I'd like to tell you about what the role of the government is and what they're doing right now. And thirdly, I'd like to talk about how they fail to prove violence actually does preserve the environment, ladies and gentlemen. Now, so let's go on to the first issue. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we on Team Negative told you that you need the consensus of the world to solve the problem to solve the environmental problem on a global level. And this, the affirmative side conceded on, because they tried to prove that they tried to prove that people all around the world have justification towards violence, ladies and gentlemen. And so we say this point stands clear in the debate. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give you an example that in the Kyoto Protocol, the United States of America pulled out. Ladies and gentlemen, after the people kept pushing the government because they wanted to, because they actually agreed to the Kyoto Protocol, the United States of America is now currently scheduled to join the Copenhagen Conference. And we say this is the effect of the global the people's consensus, ladies and gentlemen. So now what's the role of the government? In their second and third argument, yes, they mainly talked about this sentence. Governments have treated their people with neglect, and since they didn't or failed to improve the environment, people have justification to commit violence. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to attack this on the ground that governments are doing something in terms of, for example, the inconvenient truth, which came out so much in the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, the inconvenient truth was sponsored by the government. It had government investment in its creation, ladies and gentlemen. And also we say Obama in the United States of America is currently advocating cap and trade regulations, and we debated everything about that, cap and trade regulations in the nation itself. And we say this is government action on the issue of environment. And also, we say even if these governments actually fail to do the job, we say the cause is the lack of consensus, which is surely something the violence does not bring, ladies and gentlemen. Which moves me on to my third issue, which is how violence fails to preserve the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, the only mechanism that they gave us is that violence sends a big message to society, and this is a very big hit on society. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to rebut this on two grounds. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, even if this one issue is publicized widely, it doesn't necessarily mean that people agree to it, ladies and gentlemen. And we gave the example of terrorists in 9/11. But just to go on to more examples, terrorists all around, especially Al-Qaeda, they capture reporters and actually publicly broadcast their executions in order to send a message that they're right. Ladies and gentlemen, do we think they're right? No, they're wrong, because we do not agree to them. Should we agree to them? They say yes, we say no, ladies and gentlemen. And also, on to the second issue. On to the second example. We see North Korea, our neighbors actually. North Korea North Korea actually saying publicly in their news channels to the international society that they want